Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time it is that you're joining in. I'm glad you are joining us today as we get into the Word together. We are in a study right now as we introduce discipleship, just calling it circles and cycles, and learning to grow as Christ wants us to grow. That is the part of the journey that we get to take with Jesus is that in the New Testament time, Jesus was known as what was called a rabbi, and disciples, in other words, the word for student. A student would learn everything from the rabbi, and you would mirror that. You would copy that. You would become like your rabbi. And I want to look today at two stories in the New Testament, two parallel stories that I just find very fascinating about discipleship, learning to see Jesus and then doing that what Jesus did. We used to wear these bracelets, WWJD, what would Jesus do? And I always kind of joke that it should be, what did Jesus, what Jesus did? What is it that we see he did? And how do we mirror that? If we want to become like Christ, the disciples got to see firsthand. They got to follow Jesus, learn from Jesus, and he commissioned them to go. We're with him and we're going for him. And so, what does it look like for us to go with him? So, if you can, turn with me today. We'll look at the first story is in Mark chapter 5, and we're going to be down at verse 21 through 43. Mark chapter 5, verses 21 down through 43 is the whole passage. But I really want to direct your attention to the latter miracle. There's a couple things, two miracles, healings that take place. But I really want to direct ourselves to the latter one about a synagogue leader named Jairus who comes to Jesus. His daughter, he comes and my little daughter is at the point of death. She's only 12 years old is what Jairus comes to say. And so as Jesus is coming to him, there's another great passage of the woman who comes through the crowd with years of bleeding, 12 years of bleeding. Another study in itself about the 12-year-old daughter and the 12 years of bleeding, and maybe we'll come back to that someday, but great parallel things even in that. But this lady comes through, Jesus stops, she touches, she gets healed. He continues on into Jairus' house, and Jairus' men come and say, it's pointless to come now, Jesus, for she's already died. So we're going to jump forward all the way to the end of Mark chapter 5 in this story. Look at verse 38. When they arrived at the home of the synagogue ruler, they encountered a noisy uproar among the people, for they were all weeping and wailing. Upon entering the home, Jesus said, "Why all this grief and weeping? Don't you know this girl is not dead, but merely asleep?" Then everyone began to ridicule and make fun of him, but he threw them all outside. Then he took the child's father and mother and his disciples, three of them, went into the room where the girl was lying, and tenderly clasped the child's hand and said in Aramaic, Talitha cum, which means, little girl, wake up from the sleep of death. And instantly the 12-year-old girl sat up, stood on her feet, and started walking around the room. What a miracle, right? Everyone was overcome with astonishment in seeing what had happened. Incredible. Incredible. If you move forward, go to the book of Acts, chapter 9. And if you look at verses 39, it's the whole thing is verses 36 through verse 42 is the entire scene. But if we jump into this, Peter is one of those disciples that is traveling with Jesus. He gets to see these things firsthand. He gets to see what Jesus did. And when Jesus said, Talitha cum, means little girl, rise up. Watch this. This is awesome. Acts chapter 9. Watch this. There was a follower of Jesus who lived in Joppa, and her Aramaic name, Dorcas is a name that you probably know, but her Aramaic name was Tabitha, which meant gazelle. Talitha Tabitha. Think about this. And she became very ill and she died. And after the disciples prepared her body for burial, they laid her in an upstairs room. When the believers heard that Peter was nearby Lydia, they sent two men with an urgent message for him to come without delay. So Peter came back to Joppa, and arriving, they led him to the upper room. There were many widows sitting next to Peter weeping, one after another, showing him the tunics and other garments that Tabitha had had made to bless others. Peter made them all leave the room. Look at what he's doing. Same thing. He made them all leave the room. He knelt down and prayed. Turning to the dead body, he said this, Tabitha, rise up. Talitha cum, rise up. Peter literally used the same thing he saw Jesus do. I could just imagine Peter is seeing his master, and he's knowing all these years later, Jesus has given us the words to say. He's given us the model to follow. And he says, Tabitha, rise up. And at once she opened her eyes. Seeing Peter, she sat up, took him by the hand, helped her to her feet. Then he called the believers, all to the widows, to come and see what happened, that she was alive. Peter knew what Jesus had done. Discipleship is about seeing what Jesus did, knowing what Jesus did. And Jesus said, you'll do even greater. This is John 14. You'll do even the same things I have done and even greater things. You will do the same thing I have done. And so today, may you find yourself learning and studying how Jesus lived, what he did, so that when we are out and going, we can remember in our mind, this is what we have seen Jesus do, and we do the same thing that he has called us to do. I hope you have a blessed day today. May the word take root in your heart and mind as we become more like Christ. God bless you guys. Love you. Bye.